Hey, Jessica. So this is my friend Jessica, and I don't know how long we've known each other. I don't know. I can't count these things.
Yeah, neither.
We have gone to the same church for many years and served in women's ministry for many years. And I have been interviewing a couple women this month because it's nice to have conversations with women. I miss that. And also just to talk about like the hard suffering journeys, like things that the waiting times, the journeys that many different women are on different types of journeys, and kind of wanted to talk a little bit about your journey and your family's journey with adoption and just the waiting with that journey and kind of a
hmm
closing of that chapter kind of, or you can talk about that and also just
Yeah.
opening of a new chapter and what that looks like. And so before we like dive in, I wanted to ask you what your two favorite things are about your family, because then people can kind of learn about you.
Mhm.
And
About my
I think I could guess, but
family. Yeah. Um, uh, we love the outdoors and
Mm,
we love camping and hiking. And I think something great about my husband and my kids is that they're good at spur of the moment things. And that's like how I
mm.
thrive. I love the spur of the moment. And so, yeah, I think that's super fun. And I'm really proud of how we camp and hike and do all those things. Um,
Have you been
another
camping
one.
this season already?
Yeah, we did winter camping, which was
You
really fun in the
did.
snow.
Fun.
Yeah, um, that was fun. We went ice skating on a lake, and
Mm.
yeah, that was really fun. We haven't done much camping though in the spring because there's actually a restriction here where we can't travel outside of the Lower Mainland. So,
Right.
and our trailer is 4 hours away, so we can't even go
Ah,
get it.
you can't get it.
No, we can't go to drive to
Ah,
get it. So it's okay. We're fine. We live in BC. We can go to the mountains or the ocean and we'll survive.
mm.
But another thing that I love about my family is that we also love movies. And I just
Mm.
love movie nights. It is, yeah, we know how to have fun adventures and we know how to relax. And yeah.
I love movie night, but I also hate movie night because trying to decide on a movie is like so hard for us right now because the
Oh,
boys
so we
and the
we don't let the
girls.
kids decide. Kids are not
Ah,
allowed to decide.
that's helpful. Because the
Yes.
boys are
So
like older and they want to watch certain things, and
totally.
then the girls are like, let's watch Over the Moon again. And the boys are like, ah, and like, it's just, by the way, that's a good movie. You should check that one out. It's really fun.
We've seen it a few times.
It's so
Yeah.
fun and random.
It
It
is
was
so
very
fun. It's so good.
unexpected.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. We also really liked there's a new one called The Mitchells versus the Machines.
We just watched it. We just watched
We
it. It was a
loved
little
that one.
intense for the girls, I found,
Oh yeah.
maybe a little bit, but it was also like I love how there's like this under message for like what's going on in the tech world, and
Totally.
I just was like you're like, oh, that's like
Yeah,
ooh.
I know.
I like those. Those are fun for
It's
parents too.
for parents, yeah.
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 So tell me a little bit about, okay, I don't know if you want to start where you're at right now or start at the beginning of like just the adoption journey and the waiting in that
Yeah. So
journey.
I was thinking about this and the word waiting I feel like has really I would say it would be a part of my biography if I was going to write
Mhm.
one. Just like I have had to wait for so many things and I feel
Mm,
like the beauty of waiting is
mm,
that you get time. You get time to learn or you kind of are forced sometimes just to even see the joy of the waiting. At least I am. And I think even in my story of if we just use my marriage for an example, we waited 5 years to get married.
mm.
Both my children were overdue. And so I feel like every day when you're overdue when you're pregnant is like a year. So that waiting was really hard. And we waited to even start kids until my husband was done law school. So, like the waiting for that. Um, and then we had to wait to even be allowed to adopt
Mm,
because we chose Haiti to adopt from. And Haiti, you have to be 30 years old. And
I
so,
didn't know that.
yeah, and so at least one of you does, and we're the same age, same year. So we had to wait until we were 30 to even put the application in. And then Haiti is long in general, so we knew we would at least be waiting 3 to 4 years. Some people wait like 8 or 9, and
Wow.
you can also age out of Haiti. 45, you can't adopt anymore. So there's really a little bit of a window, but in that waiting, this is, I think, the most beautiful waiting portion I've ever been in. And I would never go back. If you could travel back in time and like tell yourself something, this is something I would keep a secret from myself if I were to go back. I wouldn't even talk about this waiting period because I wouldn't want it to change in any way, because it was so vital for the four of us, my 9-year-old and 8-year-old, and then my husband and I. Just what that 4 years of waiting for Haiti did is it created a foundation for our family that is, you can't replicate that in any other way. Like, our marriage got stronger, our own personal walks with God got stronger. We both poured into our own devotional time as individuals and started being in a life group in a community and started leading that life group. Just like all those little foundations in our faith really grew in those 4 years. And then for our kids, they were 3 and 4 when we started the application, or maybe even a little bit younger, maybe 2 and 3. And just who they became as people. Like, my daughter was a very clingy person. If you met her today and I described her as a 3-year-old, you would not think it was the same child. So
Interesting.
even in her growth as a human, and me being able to be there and to not be distracted by other children, I often think like, thank you, God, for not answering my prayers, because my prayers were so desperate, but they were based on impatience, and they were based on selfishness and my own timing. I didn't want there to be a gap between my kids. I was like dead set on there not being a gap, and I didn't want my biological kids to have memories before their adoptive siblings came along. I just didn't want that. I wanted it to be like, we've been a family forever. And anyways, last year, no, 2019, December, every year you have to reapply for the country you're adopting from. And it was coming up again. I think this would have been our like fourth time reapplying. And we're like, okay, let's do it. And then it was like a series of conversations, events, news stuff that happened. And we just felt like God was like, okay, you're done waiting, but not to adopt. You're not,
The answer
that's
is
not
no.
the end result here. But I'm done with you waiting, though. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, we just felt such a peace about, okay, our wait is over, but it didn't result in us having a child at the end. So
Wow.
Paul surprised me with a trip to Maui, and we spent that week as a family, the four of us, really deciding what we were going to do, as well as having an adventure and being in Maui. And it was just, I came away from that week away being like, okay, we're done with the adoption route, and we're going to foster. This is what we're going to do. And I came home, and Paul was completely on board, and the kids were really excited. And we started the process. And then March pandemic happened, and it didn't slow us down because we had already decided, and we had already had that background of just some of the paperwork stuff, like the home study and all that kind of thing. But it just was so beautiful the way that it all played out. And one of the biggest, most beautiful things about that journey is my best friend, who we've been friends since we were 13, was on the same journey, and we didn't know. We didn't fully know or understand what they were doing. Like, we would hang out and we'd talk and we would share, oh, one day I want to foster, oh, us too. But then all of a sudden, we were both in the program. We were both doing the education. We were both in the same Zoom classes. learning how to be a
Mm.
foster family. And then we both signed the papers in the same week to become foster families. And right now, we both are parenting a baby.
What?
And yeah, she has a 3-month-old and I have a 5-month-old. And we
Oh,
have
wow.
her older kids and my older kids have this new bond. They're not the
Mm.
same age. Mine are a few years older than hers, but they have this way of we we hang out as families and our babies nap together, and then we never had that as best friends. You dream about having babies at the same time, and we didn't. And now we are. So I always joke that God is such a sense of humor. Like, I
Mm.
kind of mourn the loss of that. Oh, we didn't get to be pregnant at the same time, and we've both been married for the same amount of times, but we have had kids at different timing. But now we have our babies at the same time, and it's just been one of the most beautiful things. Also, to know that I'm in the mission field that I'm supposed to be in. Like,
Mm.
God didn't just um, tie in me being a mom. I'm trying to think of how it worked, but like, he combined it all. He took
Mm.
all the things that I love to do, and and all our family stuff. And I also hate having a job. And I hate bosses, and that's just not my thing. And so this is
This
a
is your work.
job. Like,
This is your
fostering
work.
is a job. It's also,
A
you
calling.
can't do it as a job because you would die. So it's also a calling, and it's also mothering my kids. It's also being home for my husband when he comes home for lunch, which is so much fun. We have a date every day for lunch, and like, just all those things. It's everything that I wanted,
Mm.
but I didn't know that it would be part of this journey. So yeah.
Wow. So what has the adjustment been like when I know there was a process to get started and then and then the first child came home and oh my goodness, this is real. What was the adjustment like for your kids, for
Well,
you? Like,
so
since you had that in your mind earlier on, like to adopt, were you worried about how that would feel opening up and letting go and like how's that transition been?
yeah, I did. I was worried about all of that. I immediately signed myself up for counseling
Hmm.
because I was like, I just don't know what's going to happen. And I kind of treated it like a family doctor. Like, if you don't have a family doctor, like, who are you going to go to?
Mm.
And so I was like, I need a family counselor. So I could just plug in right away. But we actually have already had our first placement go home. And
Okay.
she was, without giving her details away, she was a preschooler.
Mm.
And she just needed a short term. We knew it was going to be short term. She had so much loving family involved. It just was complicated.
Mm.
And they needed her to be in a separate location other than family while they figured out. Anyways, it took 2 months and they figured it all out. And we got to see her transition out of our home into her forever home. And it was different than her original home. So it
Okay.
was a transition, but she's still with family and it's still beautiful. And we get to see the follow up from that. So we get emails and text messages and pictures and stuff like that, which is so fun. But it also made us realize that as much as we loved her and her age was really fun, it wasn't necessarily the best for us because of the age gap, which is funny because I didn't want an age gap between my kids. But the age gap now is 8 years, and it is beautiful because my
Mm.
kids can either be a part of it or they cannot be a part of it. They can
Right, right.
be hands on with the baby, or they can go do their own thing, and there's no heartbreak and there's no being left out, and there's no, yeah, it's a nice plus that he goes to bed at 7 and my kids go to bed at like 8:30. So it's nice to have that alone time very intentionally where the baby's not missing out because he's a baby, so he's supposed to be sleeping.
Yeah.
If we would try and do that with a preschooler, it's harder. No, go to
Yeah.
bed. We need some alone time. It's not very nice.
Yeah.
Uh,
What's
yeah.
What's the transition like back to having a baby again?
I actually thought it would be harder, but two biggest changes are, well, I guess maybe three. One, I have two helpers. So
Yeah.
when he wakes up in the morning, it's all me and I feed him his bottle and then I need to get changed and go to the bathroom and I just drop him off in their room and here you go, play with him while I go to the bathroom, which I could never have done with my other two. There was nobody there to
Mm,
do that. Um, especially well when my husband's at work. But number two is bottles. Oh my
yes.
gosh.
Yes,
I
for sure.
they're beautiful. They're beautiful. I love them so
Because
much.
somebody else can feed the baby.
Somebody else can feed the baby.
Yeah,
Somebody
so
else
interesting.
take the bottle. Like plus he's almost to the point where he can hold it himself. Like what is that? And then he like if we're in the car and he needs a bottle, he you just hand it to the person sitting
Oh
next to him.
man.
You know, like
Wow. Yeah.
it is wonderful. They yes, you have to clean them, but honestly, that is amazing. Both mine wouldn't take bottles, so
Mm,
that that is fantastic. And and then the last thing I think that's made it easy is that perspective. Like I literally know and cherish that he's only going to be 5 months one time, and
yeah.
like it is fine. Eventually he will sleep and won't disturb me. Eventually he won't cuddle and fall asleep on my lap. Like just all the eventuallys get me through the right now and yeah, he's very, very sweet too. So
It's interesting.
and
I can see so much more now why people choose to have age gaps with their kids or
yes,
like at this stage of life where they have more kids again where you think, "Oh my goodness,
yeah,
I don't know that I would do that." But then you're like, "Oh, I kind of get it now," right? You realize
yeah.
like, "Oh, wow, that was such a fleeting season," even though it never ever ever felt like that. And
Mhm.
just your kids are growing up so fast in front of you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you get to a certain age where your kids the difference between like 8 and 9 is not huge.
right.
But then all of a sudden they're like 9, then they're 10. Like they just keep going. Yeah, it is really fun. Plus having a baby in the house, my two never experienced babies because they were babies together. And so them watching the baby,
It's
it's
fun.
given them a little bit of perspective because they're like, "Whoa, mom, you had two like this?" I'm like, "No, actually, I had four because they ran a daycare." It's like even like my oldest, he's just like, "I can't believe it, mom." He's like, "I hear you when you get up at night. Like how many times did I get up?" And I'm like, "You guys were worse because you were a nurse, so it was even
Yeah.
worse."
It's funny because we had a little 9-month-old come over the other day, and our kids haven't really been around a lot of babies either. Like, so many of us were
Mm,
having kids at the same time. I wasn't with a lot
yeah.
of younger moms. I don't even know what we all just had babies all the time. So, but it was so crazy how much they loved it. Like, they couldn't even
Mm,
he didn't have any space. Like, the kids
yeah.
were just like, I mean, they were all around him. They were helping him. They were building things for him and tunnels and come over here and here's a toy. It was like a pet. Fiona had like left toys like in a row so she could try to lead him through a tunnel. I was like, oh dear, like this is totally like a pet. But they just loved it. And I was like, oh wow, like that's such a cool thing for them, right? To experience
Yeah.
that too. I was gonna ask though, like, I mean, presumably, like you're at such a great place right now, but presumably there were times where the longing and the waiting was really hard. And I don't know if you remember some of those times, but I especially just wanna like, what would you say to somebody who's in that journey right now and they're in the waiting and they're trying to get through? Like, what sort of, I don't know if I would say advice, but like, what were some of the things that you gleaned or some of the things that helped you?
Yeah,
Or,
I think some of the things for me would be that you know that song like he is in the waiting?
mm.
Like he really is. And I think that I mean different personalities handle waiting differently than other people. And I know for me being someone who like doesn't like to dwell in negative emotions and sometimes has to force myself to do that. I would distract myself quite easily with a different project. But that's fine and that kind of can get you through your day. But I think, and I don't want to use the word enjoying because waiting sucks, but almost like sitting in it and knowing that the wait will be over, whatever the answer is or
Mm.
whatever. Yeah, the wait can be very, very long, and sometimes 5 days can feel like a long wait for something. It can feel worse than 5 years waiting for something, but yeah, I think that you're not alone in that waiting. I think that's something that really was key for me in knowing that, um, yeah, I wasn't alone, and there was a reason for it, and the answer would come, even if the answer was no, which it was. Um, that doesn't mean that your story's over. Like,
Mm.
there's so many different things people wait for it. So I'm trying to think of like a vague advice for that, but um, yeah, I just think that you're not alone, and
But especially as it pertains to this journey, because I think that so many people who are adopting are waiting, right? Like there's a lot of waiting or waiting to add to your family. Like
mhm,
there's something a bit unique about that challenge because there's the uncertainty piece and there's just the like, I mean, you feel like you have to be ready, but like you have to be surrendered at the same time, which
mhm,
I think are
mhm.
really two different postures, right? Like it's like, oh my goodness, I need to be ready at any minute, except that I'm not. Oh, am I like, did you find that part
Yeah,
like hard?
yeah,
Just like, and even with
100%.
fostering, like just like
Yeah, I have
becoming.
random things in my house that I bought 4 of because we were adopting 2. So I would, like, buy, "Oh, these cute little mugs from Chapters for my kids," or, like, little bear oh, well, what if they don't have them when we adopt?
Oh,
And then my
right.
kids have these special 2 bear mugs that they use all the time, and then I have to get a different one for the other 2, and it will show, like, such separation, so then I bought 4. So there's, like there's things in my house that are like that, but then also being thrown into 2 separate situations, with fostering, I realized that you can just community is everything too. I have, a WhatsApp group that's specifically for people who are interested in supporting us in our foster journey, and I can just throw a request in there, and then it shows up at my door. And so community when you're waiting is huge as well, and being, like, vulnerable and open to a few people about your real raw emotions, and, like, you don't wanna go around being a Debbie Downer, but it is good to have people you can be like, "This sucks, like, what the heck is God doing? Why would he
Mm.
make us wait this long? Doesn't he know there's children who need homes? Doesn't he know we'd be a great home for children?" Like, just things like that, and you can kinda feel a little bit, like, self-righteous and, know-it-all-y because you're like, of course, what kind of plan is God creating here? But I
Mm.
think that was the beauty of those 4 years waiting to adopt is that um, the stories we've been able to walk into because we did not adopt are worth it, are beautiful. And yeah, if we had adopted, it would have also been beautiful, but it's maybe not the plan A that God had for our lives. And I'm way more content in following God's plan than
Mm.
God having to come up with plan B and plan C because I keep getting in the way. So that's what I've been learning too.
Yeah, like, what are some of the biggest things that you learned in the waiting? I mean, that I know it's such a big question, but, like, when you think about how your heart has changed in the last number of years, how would you
I like,
say.
yeah, maybe I'm not like in the moment the most patient. I definitely am not. But the the trust that I have
Mm.
built in God's timing has really rooted deep. When something's not happening, it's not my first instinct anymore to be like, is he paying attention? Does he even care?
Mm.
Like, that's not my reaction anymore. My reaction is, what are you doing? Like,
Mm.
my prayer is, change my heart so I understand what you're doing here, or open my eyes so I see where you're moving versus telling him where to start moving. And
Mm.
like even the 2 stories that we've had in our foster journey are so different. Like, you couldn't my social worker was even saying, like, you couldn't have created 2 opposite stories for someone to walk into, and I am like, "Well, the little girl we had, like, that was super quick, that was beautiful, that was what you want fostering to be, a safe haven for a child while their family figures out their stuff, and then it's short, quick, and back she goes." Like, that's beautiful. And this next story, it's like, okay, God, you've done it before. What is this story? Like, how long? Like, why is there a wait? Why is there so many? I don't know. It's hard to not like share the details, but like,
Mm,
seems like there's a lot of different ways that this could go and it's going nowhere. So it's
mm.
like,
You're
what
waiting in
are
a
you
different way now.
Yeah, yeah. And it's an interesting way too because the weight means more hurt, which
Mm,
feels hard and heavy. And if God wants to protect our hearts, why would he knowingly let them hurt longer? So the more we have him, the more we're going to get attached, and the more he's going to get attached, and the more my kids are going to get attached, and the more when his story shifts, it's going to be very painful. And so
mm,
but now I know that I hope I know this. So ask me in a year if he's still with us. But I trust that God is bigger than my own thoughts and he's bigger than my own plans and
fears.
yeah, fears, that's a really big one. Yeah. That he cares more about this child in my home than I do. And I think that sometimes as a mom at least I can lose sight of that. I can think I care the most for my kids and I'm yeah, and I don't. God does.
Mhm. Hmm.
So,
Takes the burden off your shoulders in a way that you have to come up with the perfect ending to the story like God has them.
yeah. And
Would you
also the guilt too of like
mm,
putting Zeke and Ellie through this. Like I say it that way, putting them through this, but it's also making so many opportunities for them to see God's hand moving and
yeah.
to see the world outside of just the four of us. And
Yeah. I think
um,
I think that our
yeah,
generation has been so afraid for our kids to face any sort of difficulty. Like we really try to shield them and like even our journey coming overseas, there's been so many losses for the kids and griefs at different times. And sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, like what are we doing? Like look at all the
mhm,
things they're missing out on, or look at the things that, you
mhm,
know. But then, like you said, it's like this is they're part of our story and this is part of his plan. So like this is part of the plan he planned for them. Like there's a
mhm,
purpose in it, right? Like there's things that he's achieving in them that he wouldn't have achieved if we had stayed back in Canada, right?
mhm.
Like there's things that he's achieving in your kids' lives and their hearts, opening their eyes to that they wouldn't have seen if you hadn't, been vulnerable, really, to do this
Yeah,
vulnerable journey, which is the scary part. But then when you step out in faith and you do something vulnerable like this, you put yourself in the position of maybe being hurt. It's also like putting yourself in the position of like seeing God move in really cool ways, right? Like,
mhm.
which is, it's both like the tension of like, this is really hard, but it's also really good. And it's really hard and it's really good. And we'll take a
Yeah,
step and it's hard
yeah.
and we'll take
Back
a
and
step and
forth,
it's good.
back and forth.
Take a, like,
Yeah.
what would you say to people who like, this is your chance for a shameless plug. Just kidding.
Mhm,
I know you're doing like foster awareness and stuff on your social media channels. Like,
mhm.
what would you like? How would you I don't know, like, for somebody who's really curious about it and really wants to consider it, like, what would you say to them? Like, how would you encourage them or inspire them, or what would you warn
Yeah.
them about? Or
So I think that um, so ultimately, I think anyone can foster, but I also don't think everyone should foster. So having said that, what I mean is that it doesn't take special skills to foster. Yeah, you go through a program or whatever, but there's nothing unique about me that makes me designed for fostering. But yeah, I would say like I think what draws me to it, and I'm gonna not cry, is that like the children did not choose to be in
Mm,
foster care, but I can choose to be in foster care. And I think without crying, because it's ugly, but I just think that when you can make that choice to step in to the trenches with someone, it's
mhm.
very beautiful.
Yeah, it's so redemptive, right? So,
Yeah,
like, what has
yeah,
that
I think
taught you about how God sees you?
yeah, it's very humbling and beautiful to know that he does that for us. Like,
Mm.
even when I read the Bible and in the New Testament, it talks about how um, he's made a way for everyone. Like, it's not just the Jews anymore, right? And he's like, that's the story that Jesus is spreading. He's like, no, it's for everyone. It's for everyone. And I think if I'm kind of going to put myself in there, it's like family is for everyone. Like
Mm.
being a part of a community, being part of a team, being part of like it's an honor for someone to know that someone's heart would break for you if you were broken.
Mm.
And so to be able to do that for someone else is an honor.
Mm. It's so good, Jessica. It's so cool. It's like you're living your calling. Like you stepped out into something that it wasn't what you had planned, but it's so much better than what you had planned. And like just the fit and the timing and the season is just so right. And I think that's the hard thing with waiting is like you said, it's that impatience piece. Like the fact that there really are seasons for things, it's really hard for us to get that. It's like we see it in nature, but we somehow don't get it in our own life. It's like, yeah, but now would be better. Like, like,
Yeah,
and just
yeah.
recognizing that like maybe we weren't ready yet, or maybe there were things I had to like, maybe there's things I have to learn, and that's okay. Like, but it's just hard when you don't know what the end is. And I think that's the hard part when you're in the in between is like you don't know how it's going to work out, but sometimes I think that when you're so focused on the end, you miss the things that you're supposed to learn in the middle.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and maybe that's readying you for the end so that you can actually receive that in the right way at that time, right? But like, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Ah,
I would say just do it. That's what I would say to someone
just
who's
do it.
thinking, especially if you're at the point where you're asking other foster people about it. It means it means you're thinking about it. I mean, you can always say no. I think that's something that people don't understand is that when you get a phone call, we've said no twice. And you can do that and it's okay because there's other homes and there's a better spot. And I think just try it. I don't know. I mean, we can say no right now and we can have him removed and go put in a different home. Like it I think that when you have a biological child, you can't say no anymore. Yeah, that kid is with you for 18 years. Unless horrible situations, I mean foster care, but um I think that we can be afraid of that long, long, long commitment. And I mean, you shouldn't necessarily go into things with the thought that you'll just say no all the time. But yeah, I think there's a fear. There's also a fear that you have to say yes to multiple, multiple kids. Like I don't know how many foster families I know that have definitely more than one foster child in their home. Like, and then they have 4 biological kids, and then they have, like, 6 foster kids. That's too many, but, like, I think there's this idea that foster families are huge, and we are only saying yes to 1 at a time, and I say that now, but, like, yeah, it doesn't have to be huge and big and scary. It can just be
It can be like what you can do, like it within the constraints and the limits of your own family and your own capacity.
exactly,
How
yeah.
maybe just to the last question, is I really hate to talk about this because I like talking about other things, but with fostering in this season because of the pandemic and the way that it's been, has that made it harder? Do you feel like has
Mm.
that like how do you find being able to lean on community when you are more isolated? How has that been?
Um, so both stories are different in the way that with the first story that we were part of, I found it harder because she was older, and so like play dates, play dates were life giving,
Mm,
and you had your certain people that you could only have play dates with, and so having having to kind of pick and choose who we spent time with based on the kids that we had in our home was a little bit harder. Um, Visits were hard because there were so many, and it was very there's a blurred line. Um, foster parents are essential workers because they need us. But then the children in care have zero, it felt like this, maybe just in our case, it's like the pandemic didn't happen for them. So yes, go to grandma's house. Yes, go to mom's house. Yes, go to dad's house. Yes, go to
Whoa.
yes. Oh, your whole family is at this function. Yep, drop her off. That's fine. Oh, now you're at a friend's house. Like, just the amount of people that she saw is like more than I saw the whole pandemic. And you kind of had to be okay with that and explain to my kids why they can't see their grandparents, but she can see hers. And but you can see her grandparents if you want, because clearly if she's spending time with them, so are you. So you might as well go to her grandparents.
What a weird reality. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it was. I had to actually at one point. She was on her fourth visit with a fourth different person in 1 week, and I had to just kind of say, "Hey, what? What
Hey.
is this?" Yeah. I'm like, in that case, I'm going to my mom's. I'm dropping her off and I'm gonna visit my mom. But I think that to me was the only interesting thing. Apparently, in the beginning of the pandemic, before we were foster parents, everything was just phone calls, and a lot of foster families were very excited about that because visits are tough. Visits are triggering. They're time consuming. They're vital and important, but they're tough. Like that's the honesty of it. And so when they kind of broke that down and realized no, kids need to see their parents in person, it changed things, whatever. But the story that we're in right now, there's 0 visits,
Mm.
nothing. And so that's easy. Like we just have a baby. And people have been fantastic and wanting to do stuff for us, but he's also like, I feel very capable with him. So I'm like, oh, we'll just wait. Like, make me a meal in a little bit. Like, we'll see how this goes.
Mm.
But yeah, community. Like today, I'm going for a walk with a friend, but we can only go for a walk. She can't come in. They have to make sure the babies are napped before they go. Like just things like that, because it just changes it a little bit. But ultimately, I don't know if fostering is harder in a pandemic or not, because I don't know.
Yeah, because you didn't foster before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jessica, thanks for chatting with me. I think it'll just be encouraging to hear, I don't know, just the fact that the waiting doesn't always end how we think, but that the Lord has other things
Yeah.
planned. Like that's actually a really good message, actually, for a lot of
Mhm.
people. Just that doesn't mean the story's over. And even if the worst fear that you can imagine is that this thing that you're waiting for doesn't happen, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that your story's over. That doesn't
Yeah.
actually mean that the Lord is finished, and maybe He has something better. And that's the truth, is He often does, which is so
Mhm.
cool
It is cool.
about our God. But thank
Yeah.
you for spending the time with me.
Yeah.
Awesome.